Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this NDS webinar on stress. My name is Henry Newton, Senior Policy Officer at National Disability Services, and I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that we are meeting from today and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture, and pay respect to their elders past and present. So thank you for joining us today for what is the third webinar in our member wellness webinar series. And they're designed to motivate, inform and support you during these times, which I know are tough for many of us. Before I introduce our guest, I'm going to get a little bit of a poll going to get us started, get a bit of interaction going on. So you should see one popping up on your screen now asking you, how are you feeling today? So we've got a couple of different options there. If you wouldn't mind just popping one in that best suits how you're feeling, then that would be fantastic. So our guest today has generously given her time. She does run a business, and we do have some information at the end of the presentation about how you can get in contact with her if you would like to do so. You should also have been sent a workbook ahead of time, and that's for a couple of things. It's for taking notes. It's courtesy of our speaker. It also includes a stress test, a resilience test, and an offer to NDS members for some further webinars and training, and there's some more information about that coming up. So we should begin to see some polling results coming through now. Okay, and we've got a lot of, so leading is exhausted, which is understandable, I think, given the current times. But we do have 23% of people saying that they're relaxed and 22% of people saying that they're happy. So that's fantastic. That's really excellent to hear, but I can understand the amount of people who are primarily saying they're exhausted, and presumably, these things are not necessarily mutually exclusive as well. For those who are kind of exhausted and stressed, we hope that our guests can provide some tools for dealing with this. And whether it's working through the things that you can change or recognizing the things that you can't, I'm sure that there will be some advice there. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Karen Walsh, our guest. So Karen heads up Pure Magic International Business Solutions and has worked internationally for 20 years, training CEOs, senior leaders and teams on how to become more effective in their roles while creating resilient, robust organisations. She has won 5 awards, both national and international, including Coach of the 2016 Australian CEO of the Year, and also was a finalist in the 2017 Women in International Business Award. Working in Australia, her work has concentrated on the community and not-for-profit sectors. She also has a particular passion for aged care and disability. She has worked to improve the lives of all those she comes in contact with across all sectors, delivering programs to increase resilience, have effective, courageous conversations at work, deal with difficult behaviour, and achieve individual, team and organisational mastery. She runs monthly webinars to empower women and leaders as well. She has expertise in managing stress and increasing resilience in both personal and professional lives, and those are 2 things which have been, she lists as the greatest challenges during her own career as well. So obviously a very busy woman, so we're very grateful for her time today, and today Karen is going to talk to us about how we can manage stress during what we can probably all agree is fairly abnormal times, I would say. So Karen, welcome, and I will pass over to you.
Thank you so much, Henry, and welcome everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. And thank you so much, Emerson, for this most wonderful opportunity. It's really lovely, and I so appreciate that. So really today was a really kind of, I suppose, a really relevant time for me to be talking about this particular topic called super stressed. And it's really interesting, particularly in the times that we're at the moment, where people are so stressed. Most people are stressed that I come across. And it's interesting, you know, one of the greatest things we always want to do is work from home. But what's really interesting is that so many people are finding what they call cabin fever. So, you know, they're stressed at work, they're stressed at home. So I think it's a really good discussion to have around the fact that, so what is stress? What does that mean to us? And what is resilience? And what does it also mean to us? One of the things I was saying to Emerson before is that there's so many things I'd like to share with you and want to share with you that I'm going to probably go through these slides fairly quickly. If you'd like to speak to me later about them, that's absolutely fantastic. But there's so much to learn about stress and resilience. And there might be some things, for example, that really are not new to you, but maybe some of those things that we forget about so often in our really busy daily lives. So let's get into it. I think the first thing that I really wanted to talk about is, as Henry says, I do have a love for disability. One of my very best friends has a beautiful son with cerebral palsy, and I sort of have walked some of the journey with her. I have worked in a lot of disability services in Australia, so sort of very familiar with some of the stuff that goes on. And I thought I would just start off with this slide. So what do you actually face besides COVID-19? And so what we know is it's, you know, characterized, the industry or the sector can be characterized by disruption. There has been some issues around the rolling out of the NDIS. We know that the financial situation of many providers is becoming increasingly precarious. And that's obviously worrying a lot of leaders in organizations who are running these organizations. More providers are operating at a loss, which is a bit of concern in terms of 28% up from 2000 and 21% in 2017. So there is an increase in some of the disruptions in services and some of the difficulties that services are facing. And that's very stressful for many of those people in the service. And I'm sure that some of these things I'm actually talking to you about right now are resonating with you. These are stressful situations. Mergers are a growing feature of the sector at this stage. And it's a very tough operating environment. It's very tough in terms of going from, you know, government funded to fee for service. Having watched a lot of that was very difficult for many organizations, and it's still difficult for many organizations. And I think there's, you know, this ongoing issue around finances and long-term sustainability. The other thing that apparently the Australian Disability Workforce Report, which is where I'm getting these figures from, talks about low levels of collaboration within the sector, which is problematic in terms of the fact that the NDIS was premised on a robust system of service providers collaborating together and offering services. And that is happening, but not enough to allow a lot of the actual organizations to thrive or survive. This will require organizations to be able to obviously operate profitably, high staff turnover, but there's also an issue around staff who aren't actually educated enough or capable enough to actually do some of the work that's required. And there's a lot of difficulty in the sector. Workforce challenges remain top of mind. 63% found it difficult to recruit disability support workers. And I'm talking about people who are, you know, educated in that field. So ultimately, over 70% said that recruiting talented health workers is increasingly more difficult. And as I said, that came from the Australian Disability Workforce Report. So the reason why I start with this slide is that overall, it's a very difficult situation in which the disability sector sits for all of these reasons. And of course, that's just without COVID. You add COVID onto that and stresses that COVID brings in everyday living, and it becomes very difficult. So one of the things I want us to talk about today is, so how can we actually manage all of these things that are coming at, you know, stressful from this side, from that side, and it makes us really, really, it's hard to recover in some ways, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. So without spending too much time, I'm talking really to you today about stress, the definition, the types of stress, fight or flight, and also what are we doing with coping and, you know, with stress and COVID. And then probably my favorite topic of them all with emotional intelligence is resilience. I love the topic because I think it's the most wonderful way to think about life. And if we can learn to think more resiliently, or to think of in a more resilient and positive way, there's many things that we can do to move from stress to resilience, which I'll be talking about today. I won't bore you here. This is just a little bit of me, what I do. As Henry said, I work across 3 different continents, so Australia, Fiji, and Africa. I have a background in working in human development. I do lots of conference speaking and absolutely love what I do. And I'm just so gifted and so lucky really in that, because it wasn't really the way that I'd planned my life to be, but it just came in that. So I'm so, so deeply appreciative of everything that I've been able to do. And I love what I do, including working in the disability and aging sectors. So I get this is, quite an existential question, but as the new world dawns, what can we learn about ourselves, how we manage our stress, and what resilience we have in terms of during COVID? But then I'm going to take it past COVID, because I think it's an increasingly frenetic world. Let's just go pre-COVID. I was saying to one of my colleagues pre-COVID, it's the most interesting thing. I think that humans are like ants. And she said, well, what a strange thing. And she said, why? I said, because I kind of feel as if we're all running around frenetically like ants, and we kind of meet each other and we keep on going along our little ways. Everybody's trying to get so much done. Everything seems to be so much more stressful and frenetic. And maybe COVID, I don't know if we think about it in a more spiritual or more existential way, is here because it's Mother Nature saying, oi, take a pause, press the pause button. What are we doing about the world? What are we doing about, how we look after each other? Is it Mother Nature saying, I've had enough of you polluting my air and polluting my water? And I think it's a really interesting question around COVID. But at the end of the day, we sit here thinking about, a lot of us, I think it's about time for reflective practice. What are we doing? How can we actually live our lives more effectively? Are we doing what we want to do? Are we doing what we love? Is stress so prevalent in our life that it's just so stressful trying to get from, going to work in the morning to going to bed at night? And I think it's an interesting question that I'll come back to a little bit later on. So with COVID-19, we've actually seen obviously unprecedented stress. So I showed you the slide about the disability sector stress, which you all know better than I do even. So I'm just going to add on top of that COVID. And COVID then brings with us these sort of questions, a completely changed world. And for some of the services like disability, it's not necessarily that you have remote teams or virtual teams, but many organizations do. Massive changes in how we work, when we work, why we work, how we work. Technology for me, for example, technology is the way of the future. And I'm not that gifted at technology. I have children around me who show me and help me, but it's actually quite, scary becoming digital. I say, phew, it can be scary, but I try desperately to embrace it if I can. And I'm sure for some of you, and there's lots of you on the line, you would understand that technology can be scary. A home-based workplace and all that brings. So one of my clients said to me the other day that she was speaking to some of her people who are virtual, and she asked me this very interesting question. If I actually speak to my people virtually, is it okay if they're sitting in their pajamas and, they've got their hair all disheveled? And I said, absolutely not. No, because you have to create a professional working place from home, just as you do from work. So I think it's about, if you think that I'm working from home, then we act as if we're working from home. So that brings dilemmas. How do I adapt professionally to this new world? And there's so many people in the sector that are saying, do I really want to do this anymore? Do I really want all the stress? Do I really want all the challenges? And I'm sure there's a lot of you listening to me who are answering that question or asking yourself that question. Business bankruptcies, we're seeing businesses not surviving because of this huge, long, unprecedented length of people staying at home and working from home. Businesses aren't surviving. So that brings a lot of stress to many families and many businesses. Huge uncertainty about the future. So one of my Fijian colleagues said to me yesterday, oh, Karen, you're not coming back until next year. I said, what? He said, well, because we know that in Fiji that Australians are not allowed to fly out of Australia until the end of this year. And I said, really? I didn't know that. And I thought, I'm not sure that's correct. But anyway, there's, do I go, don't I go? There's huge uncertainty. And all of you listening to me would probably have a lot of uncertainty about many things that you face in the sector. And then, of course, if you're thinking about working from home, it's lovely to work from home until the children drive you crazy, or the husband or the wife are driving you nuts, and you've got the cabin fever, etc., etc. Now, in disability, that's not necessarily your life, in terms of you've still got a service to provide, regardless of where you are. But some of you might be working from home, and that also brings its own stresses. Worrying about what the future will bring. How will I cope in this new world moving forward? And the old question I think I ask myself, so what does my future hold now that the world is so significantly changed? And I think it's something that probably you all ask yourselves. So COVID-19 undoubtedly brings stress with it for all the reasons that I've outlined, but I think it also can managing stress well then equal resilience. And it's a very interesting question, because I think that there is a lot of research and studies that talk about that the better you're able to manage your stress, the more resilient you tend to become. And I'll explain what they mean by that. But I think the questions that we need to be asking ourselves at the moment are these. So what will I be doing differently now and in the future? If I come back to my Mother Earth question of, I'm going to put you on pause and really get you to think about what you're doing and how you're treating me and the world, etc. What will we do differently now and in the future? How will my life be different? The world has changed, and there certainly seems signs to say that the virtual teams working from home will become a much more massive part. I read actually 58% of our working lives moving forward. So how will that be different for me? How can I be an outstanding person to guide the future? I'm really hoping that everybody around the world is taking this time to really think about not only their professional lives, but their personal lives as well. How am I living? Am I being effective? How are my relationships? Can I be better in them? What can I do to lead my teams more effectively? What can I do to connect better with my children? What can I do to be, just a better human being? And it sounds, as I say, coming back to that existential question, but I just think if we can, as a world, just stop, press that pause button and start thinking about what we're doing, whether we're at home, whether we're working in the disability sector, whether we're working in banking. How can I improve my ability to be a great team member even moving forward? It doesn't matter if you're in a leadership role or not. And what life lessons will this experience teach me? So, and what more will I be doing with my service? What more and how differently can I work with my teams in my organization? How can I allow them to do things differently that might make the changing world in disability a different and more effective and more efficient place to work? These are all big questions, but hopefully we're spending time thinking about these things. And lastly, how can I obviously use what I'm thinking about professionally in my team or in my organization? So how do we manage our stress well? And in fact, what is stress? And I love to spend time talking about this. And when I'm training organizations, my preferred method is face-to-face. But what I like to do is really start thinking about, so what is stress and how can we overcome it? So, you've got the stresses of the sector, which we've talked about. I've talked about COVID and what that brings, but also there's other just daily living stresses that we need to think about, So it's almost as if the disability sector and age sector is also, you've got three whammies. You've got difficulties in the sector that you have to resolve. You've got COVID. You've got just general daily living. Things like, health of loved ones, financial stress, not necessary. You might not have all of these, but some of us do and some of us don't. And some of these things affect our lives and we think about them and then we ponder a bit more. Emotional, mental health issues. Mental health issues at the moment has risen by 36% in the last, I think it was 3 weeks I was reading somewhere. Environmental stressors, service finances, we talked about that. Injury stress. Some of us have got injuries or our loved ones have. Staffing issues, difficult family members. Well, I think all of us have a difficult family member sometimes now and then. And it's difficult to work with. And then the existential stress I was talking about, what am I doing with my life? I mean, I'm in the baby boomers, and I think that probably a lot of you on the line are in that baby boomer area, maybe younger, but if you're in a baby boomer sort of time of your life, you might be asking, well, what am I doing with my life? I've got X amount of years left, and what do I want to do? What am I passionate about? Where's my purpose? And then, of course, pandemics. So overall, it's a big, lots of things to think about and lots of things to deal with. So The definition of stress. Let's just talk a little bit about what stress is before I get into ways to deal with stress. There's many definitions, but if you have a look at what's on the screen right now, a state of mental, physical, emotional strain or tension from adverse or demanding circumstances is the general stress definition. But the other one that I really like and I prefer and I use in my work is this one, is that actually stress is the outcome of three different things. It's the outcome of a relationship between personality, perceived pressure, and coping mechanisms. So personality, perceived pressure, note the word perceived, and coping mechanisms. And if you use those all well, it could be growth. But if you don't use those well as a three areas of stress, then you're probably going to go into the overload environment. But let me talk a little bit more about them. So the first being personality. And what we know from the research around personalities, and there's much research around this, and we know that people are obviously wired differently and are born with different genetic inheritance. But what we know is that some of us are slightly or definitely more highly wired than others. So for example, I'm using the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and I'm using, if any of you are familiar with the very last one, which is the J's or the P's. J's are people who tend to be very orderly, very structured. They want things done a particular way. They never lose their keys. They're always on time. A P person is more relaxed, go with the flow. She'll be right. We'll get there. So the J's are people who tend to be more wired genetically. I'm one of those, so I'll be open with that. And so as a J, more organized and whatever, I tend to stress more. I tend to be more anxious around things. Whereas my youngest child is so relaxed that he'll, I always kid with him that, can you just get a little bit more stress in you to get things done? So there's pros and cons of both. But those people who tend to be more highly organized or more highly stressed, as in terms of our nature, we have to work harder at managing our stress. And the better we manage it, generally, the more able we are to cope and the more resilient we become, which I'll explain in a moment. So are you more wired? Are you more angsty, do you think, as a person, generally? Or are you more relaxed? Just answer that question and then we'll keep moving. Pressure is a very interesting thing. Pressure is the ongoing buildup of those little things that happen each and every day that eventually, if you don't deal with them and if you don't resolve them, they just build up and up and up. So the more irritations and frustrations you have build up, and the less you talk about them or the less you deal with them, often they build up and up and up and then explode just like a pressure cooker. And what happens then is if we don't use all of those coping mechanisms that we have, it leads to stress. So pressure is at the lower base, and the more that life gets difficult or problematic, the more that you go on and on without resolving those issues, eventually they just explode one day and you get unwell, you get sick, or people think, wow, they seem to be really well the last couple of weeks. Where did that come from? It's come from build up, build up, build up. So pressure, if left unresolved, turns into stress. And if we leave stress resolved or undealt with, it can actually kill us. An example being my hairdresser's husband, 39 years of age, was dead before he actually hit the floor. And really it was stress and stuff that was going on at work that was unresolved. So all the point that I make here is that pressure becomes stress. And unless we deal with it, it can actually certainly hurt us. So the coping mechanisms. So we've got personality, we've talked about pressure, coping mechanisms. Coping mechanisms is nothing you don't know, but how do we use them, or do we use them? So the age-old regular exercise, 3 to 4 times a week, 30 to 40 minutes a time. Healthy diets, 8 hours sleep a night, balance, keeping a balanced life. Sometimes I think when we're so in the moment at our work and, stresses with the rolling out of the NDIS or the families of the people that you're looking after, we forget the balance. And I think it's really important that we take this time now to really start thinking about the balance that we have or don't have in our lives and what we're going to do about that. And things like meditation, music, animals. Most of us I get a lot of therapy and a lot of relaxation from animals. Nature, walking, painting, books, So Jen, who's my friend with Ashley, the beautiful young man with cerebral palsy, she has a little boat, and that's her happy place. That's what relaxes her. That's what turns her stress off. And she comes back from that boat after a couple of days really relaxed. So I guess the question is, what's yours? What is your happy place? Do you have balance? I think this is a very important point that's made a lot in the readings and the research. What is your purpose? You know, why do you get out of bed in the morning? And with that purpose, are you passionate about what you do? Do you love what you do? Or has it become so overwhelming and so much like a chore that right now you'd rather not do it because it's just all too much? And so it's really thinking about why am I here and what am I wanting to do with the rest of my life, regardless of where I am in my career, which ties back into the beginning of what I was saying earlier about that sort of existential question, where am I and what am I doing? An optimistic mindset is one of the key things that comes out of today. And I know you've probably read those words and heard those words, but seriously, ladies and gentlemen, the research is very, very, very strong on this, that the more you're able to think in a positive explanatory style, which I'll explain in a while, the better you are able to deal with life's challenges. And so optimism is an absolutely critical aspect of resilience and managing stress. So one of the things I want to just quickly throw in here is a resource. It's a gentleman by the name of Daniel Goleman, and another one is Martin Seligman. Martin Seligman is the king of positive psychology, so you might want to just have a little bit of look at what he does. Daniel Goleman wrote Learned Optimism, and he wrote Emotional Intelligence, and his work is fantastic. So Daniel Goleman and Martin Seligman. And also stop being hard on yourself. You know, you're in a difficult situation. A lot of people have this negative chatter in their heads, and I'm not doing a good job, or I'm not able to, I'm overwhelmed, and all of these negative things. As long as you think negatively about you and what you do in life and overall nothing works, then that's how your life will be. If you're able to stop and say, hold on a minute, there's so many things I can be grateful for, and look at ways of trying to go round problems and come up with solutions, no matter what they are. And that might be just take a break, move away from the problem, have a coffee, take a mental health day. Sometimes it gives you the opportunity to just press that pause button, stop and think about what you're doing, and then move forward. I won't stay here very long. There's two types of stress. One is acute, so it's very quick, sharp, painful. It could be, you know, a really bad stomach ache, a very bad migraine, argument with the spouse, traffic jam. So those are things that happen very quickly. But the more, I think, damaging type of stress is the chronic stress. So that ongoing fatigue, that ongoing exhaustion. So it was interesting, Henry, that when we did the survey or the poll, that whilst you had many relaxed, and it was sort of even between relaxed and exhausted, the fact is that exhaustion is a very common denominator amongst the community sector. Disability, aged care, out of home care, you know, meals, transport, etc. It's a very key factor, which I think is very worrying, because the more exhausted we are, the less we can manage life. The less we manage life, the more depressed and the more negative and the more exhausted we become, that sort of cycle. So to fight or flight, how about flow? Now, obviously, you know all of these things. I don't have to stay here too long, but obviously the combination of reactions we have to stress is known as flight or fight. Sometimes we come out fighting, sometimes we run away, you know, and I think it's important to look at which is your most common way of dealing with stress. Do you avoid or do you come in? Or most importantly, are you able to think about, you know, to flow is to try and take that deep breath and think, okay, today I'm going to take life calmly. I will just deal what's in front of me, one thing at a time. And that sort of calm thinking, it's absolutely critical. Whereas I was explaining just now, the J's tend to be people who are more uptight, the P's are more relaxed. So for people who tend to be more stressy, it's just about learning to just think, okay, what can I do one thing at a time, and just go through life in a much more calm and flowy manner. Breathe. Keep on keeping that, you know, pause button. Just take it easy. And it was interesting what Henry was talking about. I travel internationally all the time, and one of the things I absolutely loathe, you would not believe this, is flying. I'm always nervous. I'm very stressy, and I've been doing it for so long. I'm a psychologist by training, heaven forbid. Wouldn't you think clinician heal thyself? Well, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, I still have to sort of do a little prayer before I get on a plane. I do my breathing. Sometimes I have to take a pill to help me, which I don't like doing, but it's very stressful for me, and I don't quite know really why that is, but it is. So I need to work out ways to deal with it so that I can get on that plane and off that plane in a calmer way. Stress, and this is a very interesting point I wanted to make about today. There are some of the researchers that talk about in the world that stress is a choice, that when life happens, we can choose to be stressed about it, or we can choose to take a back step, think about it, press the pause button and say, right, today, will I really get anxious, or can I really take the more relaxed approach? So in your workbook, it would be really good if we could say, do I choose to react today, which is more uptight, react, or do I choose to respond today, which is more, relaxed and more easygoing? A quick another little reference for you, Stephen Covey, Covey, wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's one of the best books I've ever read in my life, and I use it all the time professionally and in my life. He talks about this, that stress is a choice. So at times there is nothing we can do about it. There's nothing we can do about COVID. All we can do is manage in the very best way that we can so that we come out on top the other side. And so my friend rang me this morning, I've got cabin fever and I'm so angry and so frustrated. And I said to her, about what? And she said, well, I'm sitting at home and I'm bored. And I said to her, stop, press that pause button. You've got the opportunity to be at home. What else can you do? She said, well, I could do gardening. I said, well, that's good. I could maybe watch a movie. That's fantastic. I've got all my work done for the day. Well, why don't you have a sleep? Why don't you, do something? Meditate. Don't, instead of thinking, oh, I'm so stressed about it, just relax and take it easy. Think about, so stressing and worrying has one outcome. It makes us unwell, as I'm saying here. I'm not necessarily talking, ladies and gentlemen, about the big ticket items, the death of a loved one, all those kind of things. I'm talking about general living. If there's nothing you can do, try and remain calm. Try and think calm. Okay, pause button, one thing at a time. Do everything you can to rectify the situation, remain positive, which is the thought I was making you have in a moment, and use as many of the coping skills. So running, exercise, animals, meditation, nature, all of the things that you really love to do. And the most important thing is to look after your health. Without your health, you have nothing. And my grandmother said this saying to me, so if you want to quickly jot it down, she said to me, health is all. Without health, all is nothing. And I remember thinking, oh, that's right, Nan, when I was 22, but I'm a lot older now. And I think it's an important point. If you don't look after your health, we don't have anything. And I was reading the most really scary research about a month ago to say, listen to this, that Australians are now the most obese nation in the world. Not the Americans, the Australians. And I thought that was so frightening because we don't exercise enough, we don't watch our diet, we drink too much alcohol, etc., etc. So probably the most important thing is to look after your stress. I'm just wondering if we can have a quick look at how you handled the stress survey before I go on. How did you score on the stress test? And I'm just wondering if I can have any sort of poll up here, Henry. How did you score on the stress test? It was circulated prior to this meeting. If you didn't get a chance to glance at it, no worries. But if you wouldn't mind, just pop in there where you scored, just so we can see. So 4 points or less means that you're pretty relaxed, kind of cruisy. Nothing tends to upset you or get you going. 5 to 12 means that you can sort of do both. Sometimes you can be stressy, sometimes you can be more relaxed. And certainly if you scored 14 points or more, it means that you tend to be in an ongoing state of stress and agitation and more prone to being unwell than others. So not sure how you went. Okay, maybe we can discuss it at another stage, but there you go. Thank you so much. So, that's interesting. So what I've got the scoring here is that 40 14% of you scored below 4. So 14% of you are relaxed and cruisy and easygoing. 51% of you scored between 5 and 13, which means you can be relaxed-ish or you can be stressed. And this is pretty scary. 44% of you saying that you're in the very high bracket of stress. And that means that you're sort of teetering sometimes on being unwell because of stress. Pretty scary and something to think about. So thank you so much for doing that. Stress is directly related to the way in which we feel pressure and how we deal with it, which is what I've been saying this morning. And interestingly, resilience is our ability to recover from it. So there is a direct correlation, ladies and gentlemen, between managing stress well and being more resilient in life's challenges, which I'll move into now. So now we're talking about the importance of resilience in our lives right now. And obviously it's pretty tough out there. And of course, as I said when I started, you know, the disability sector and community sector overall have other pressures over and above this. I thought this was a really, really neat little thing I'd throw in, that camels. Sometimes my clients say, so what's the most resilient person, or what's the most resilient animal in the world? And actually it's a camel. So these are interesting things. They're built for survival. They can live for 6 months without a meal or water. I think that's absolutely amazing. Obviously they survive because of the fat in their humps, we know that, but they don't sweat until their body temperature is over 41. And they recover by rehydrating faster than any other animal. Look at that, 113 liters, whoa. If any other animal drank water that quickly, they would dilute their blood and not survive probably. I guess the question then is, do you have their ability to adapt to changing circumstances? The key thing about resilience is a positive mindset and adapting to what's in front of you. Those two things, positive mindset and adapting to what's happening to you. So what is resilience? We talk about the ability to pick yourself up, persevere in the face of adversity, and on some level recover. I believe that resilience is the ability to bounce forward. People often think that resilience is the ability to bounce back. It's actually to bounce forward, to greet whatever challenge is facing you with an innate sense of hope and optimism. Not so much hope and optimism that you're going into la-la land, but certainly that things will work out. Have a hope that things will get better, because if we don't, then we just go down the slippery slope to disillusionment and sadness. I won't bore you with the studies, but there's so many studies around resilience, mostly around trauma, mostly around things like natural disasters, warfare, discrimination, hurricanes, cyclones, childhood abuse, and all those kind of things. But what's interesting is that studies show that people are able to recover from those particular events. Would they forget all of those incidences? No, I don't believe they will. I don't believe you can actually get over warfare, for example, and walk away from that, never ever think about it, or it does not affect you. These things affect us. The issue is, how do we deal with them? And are we able to cope with them in such a place that we can still move forward in our lives in a productive and efficient way? Those are the key things around stress and resilience. And through genetics, there's some research to say that resilience can be genetically transported. Natural conditioning, how we are raised, how we taught to think, how we taught to look at things and challenges in life. Some are more resilient than others, just inherently. But the good thing, ladies and gentlemen, is that we can learn to be resilient. It doesn't matter if you're not born resilient. There's ways that we can learn to be resilient over time, leading to more positive actions and outcomes for ourselves. It's believed that resilience comes through, as I said earlier, about a certain way of thinking about things. And I'll just explain very briefly what positive explanatory style is. So Seligman talks about this, and this is it. When something happens to us in our life, and it could be over time, if over time we start seeing things and adversities as things to, how can I recover? Or what can I do? Or what's the way that I can change the situation? Or what do I need to do to get to the other end? So if, for example, let's say somebody goes into your car and you're driving, and, you know, if you have a negative as opposed to positive explanatory style, a negative explanatory style will say, well, there I go, just my luck, trust me, you know, trust them. Now I've got to just go and spend time getting my car fixed. Notice, trust my luck, just me, you know, it's all bad really. And now I've got to spend time getting my car fixed, as opposed to a positive explanatory style, which is, oh gosh, thank heavens we're all okay. It's just a little bump. It really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of life. We're all safe. It's okay. Now, positive and negative explanatory styles happen over time. You can't say, well, Monday at 4 o'clock, that's it, I'm going to have a positive explanatory style. People grow, generally it's in our childhood, but we can change that. If you have a positive explanatory style over a long period of time and always see the good in things, then that's how you start to think more, as I say, in a resilient way and in a positive way. And the more you think in that way, generally, the more resilient you become, because you see that life can be overcome and the adversities aren't going to kill you. Some of you will remember that guy. I think he was an American and he was in the desert somewhere and he was out on his own. He didn't tell anybody where he'd gone and he got his right hand caught under a boulder. Long story cut short, this is resilience. He knew that nobody was going to come. So he had to think about, how am I going to resolve this issue? How can I recover? That's the words I want you to write in your workbook. 4 words. How can I recover? Anyway, he actually tore off. He had a little pocket knife in his bag. He tore off, or he cut off part of his t-shirt. He wound it around his arm and he cut his arm off. Now, that's extreme, right? But that's also resilience. That's what we talk about. Oh, how can I recover? And in disability, with all the things that you're doing and all the challenges, it's about how can you recover? What do you need to do to get through this, whatever it is that's happening? And building resilience through COVID, it's about adapting. You know, it is a work-home organization that we have for some of us. The world has changed. We're a face-to-face generally organization, training, leadership development. We've now gone online. I prefer face-to-face, but it's about adapting. We have to look after our wealth and in being our health. And I think we need to see our health as our wealth, because without it, we don't have anything. Expect that life will be good for you. Try and be hopeful, optimistic. Look for solutions to problems when things go wrong. Check your self-talk. Now, the self-talk is oh, trust my luck for the man to hit me in the car, as opposed to thank heaven. So always when you're thinking negatively, stop, press the pause button and think again. Live a balanced life, you know, live at work, absolutely, but enjoy your friends, enjoy your family, enjoy your life, enjoy the beach, enjoy the nature, enjoy your life, you know, because unless you believe in reincarnation, it's the only one we have, right? Accept and expect things will go wrong, because life is never perfect. We know that. The other thing that's really important around resilience and managing stress is have to clear goals and action plans. What will I do when, and how can I achieve that goal, and how can I actually do this, and how can I travel overseas? Life is not a sprint, as they say, it's a marathon. Good time management skills, I find, reduces stress. The more organized I am, the more I know what things have to be done by when, the less I find that I'm stressed, and I'm sure that's your situation as well. So learn good time management skills. Brilliant thing is gratitude. You know, there's so many good things we do have. And be humble. You know, thank you. Every day you wake up, say thank you to your higher power for what you do have, you know, gratitude, humility. And everyone is fighting their own battles. Remember, if you lead a disability organization, or if you're working in one, everybody who's working with you has their own battles. So compassion and empathy is really necessary in this difficult time. I'll quickly show you the 7 C's of resilience. Number 1 is competence, the ability to know how to handle stressful situations. The confidence, the belief in you that you can do a good job, and that you know you are a great human being doing the best you can. Connection is critical to, I think that actually connection is the base of the human endeavor. Without being connected to people, like other primates, we live in social cliques. And I think if we're not connected enough, I think that often leads to isolation and loneliness. Character, intrinsically how a person is, and how you look at life and how you deal with life. Obviously, I'd like to spend more time on this, but I'm just conscious of time. Coping. Now, this is a thing that I said to you about stress. So stress and resilience go hand in hand. If you have the coping mechanisms, a whole range of them, the more you use a range of coping mechanisms, the more resilient you tend to be, the less stressed you are. So it's about making sure that overall, you're looking and using all of the different types of resilience: running, exercise, sleep, meditation, whatever it is. Contribution, if you're feeling, you know, personally contributing to the world, making a difference. I think that's so important. How you cope, etc. Control. So they're all here, and obviously you will get these slides afterwards, but those are said to be the 7 C's of resilience. Now, I'm just mindful of time, but this is probably one of the most gorgeous examples of resilience that I can show you. And I really want you to think about this. It's quite moving, but the reason I use this is because I think it really looks at dreams and hopes and expectations and passions for life. And sometimes they don't go the way we want them to do or go. And how do we come back from that? So have a look. So in terms of resilience, the reason why I actually chose that particular vignette is because Derek, the athlete, had a choice. You know, I mean, that was his whole life, years and years of practice, years and years of dedication, years and years of I suppose, the whole family going without to get this young man to the Olympics. And, you know, he was chipped to win. And at the end of the day, you know, life just intervened. So I guess at that time, the point I'm trying to make is that he had a choice. He could either roll over or he could say, well, forget this. You know, in that moment, although it was so incredibly despairing, he chose to go on. And I think it's the most amazing, gorgeous, I suppose, indication of resilience that I wanted to share with you. So I hope you all enjoyed that. To everyone in disability, I think that this is something I've always wanted to say, and I say often when I can, is that I think you may not know how valuable you are at times. And I think you may not feel appreciated at times, and you may lose sight of the magnificent work you do, all of you, all the time. And it can be very difficult, as we've talked about today. At times, your body may ache and your mind may falter. You are the backbone of our society. And together with the nurses, the teachers, aged care workers, and others who bravely provide the most wonderful community sector services, we thank God for you, or a higher power for you. Where would we be without you? So I think it's a really, you know, homage to all of you out there for all of the things that you're dealing with, and to just let you know how truly grateful we are to have you with us. This I just threw in as a bit of a fun thing. We will never surrender. We will keep on going. That positive mindset. He was a very interesting leader, actually one of the best I think the world has ever seen, but that's another discussion. So I just want you to know we pay homage to you. And lastly, my last slide today, which I think is so important, comes back to what I started talking about when I came on today, was about that sort of existential question. So with COVID, with Mother Nature, as I see it, putting a pause button on of all of us, what are we going to do, each and every one of us, every day as human beings, you know, as teams, as families, as organizations, as communities? What are we going to do, each of us, every day to turn things around? What are you going to do to turn things around for you, your family, your team, your organization, your country, and our world? Because we are, each and every one of us are responsible for looking after this planet and making it the most beautiful place that it possibly can be. I'm also going to send to Emerson and ask her to send out to you the most wonderful passage I read about COVID-19, written by Bill Gates. It's incredible. And he talks about we've lost the knack of kindness and compassion. And he believes that that's one of the reasons why COVID-19 has arrived. But I will ask Emerson to kindly send it to you, because I think it beautifully reflects what we need to be doing right now. So really, I would like to thank all of you. It's been the most wonderful opportunity, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. Obviously, stress and resilience is much more than what I've been talking about today. There's a lot of research, there's strategies, but in the time I had, I hope it was meaningful, and I hope you enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That's fantastic. There's a lot in there and a lot to unpack, and we're getting a lot of positive comments through the chat, people saying it's really valuable, and especially with the existential questions, a number of people saying that, you know, they ask themselves those questions about what they're doing all the time. You know, there's a lot to think about there. In terms of some of the questions that people are asking, we've got one person who kind of noted that, I think it was around off the back of the question around, or the conversation around, you know, being in your PJs for Zoom meetings when working from home. And Kathy says, you know, there's some of us who are juggling an unexpected bunch of responsibilities, and being a mum and a fly-in, fly-out wife, respite provider, auntie, and whether there's, you know, whether we should also be giving people some slack in this time as well, if they've got a lot of responsibilities that they need to juggle, and it may even tie into that kind of point you were making about, you know, being kind to yourself as well.
I think it's a really good question, actually, Henry. I think the thing around that is that, I think we all need to give ourselves some slack. We need to give each other some slack. Coming back to Bill Gates talking about we need to be more kind and show more compassion. Absolutely. I think it's about time coming back to that. What am I doing with my life and how can I treat my people better? That if mum is at home, and I have friends with young children, so she's at home trying to get things done at work, and she's got these 2 babies that are at her, heels. Her husband might be there, he may not be there, or it could be the other way around, but she's very stressed. And so what I think is with her is just, as I said earlier, just one thing at a time. And if we are leading organizations and our people are stressed, just be kind. Just be compassionate, obviously. But I think this is another very important point that I want to make, is that we are running organizations, and that if people do have to put in reports or they do have to do work from home, then we need to expect that they will be doing it in time with the qualitative output, And if that means doing it at night because it fits in with their particular situation, fine. But I don't think that necessarily we should be giving them slack in terms of what the business needs, unless it's possible to do that. But if things have to be done, then we have to expect that they need to be done. Otherwise, our organizations just grind to a halt. If it is in pajamas, what I was saying, some of my other clients were asking me, I think it's more the mindset. So one of my clients actually came on and she was in her pajamas, and I said, oh, okay, so how's that? And she said, I really shouldn't be in my pajamas because I need to be thinking as if, I'm at work professionally. So we talked a lot about that, and a lot of my clients have asked me, I think if you are in your workspace, try not to be anywhere else but in that workspace. And I think often getting dressed in that way or more formally kind of gets you in the headspace, that's all. But if some of you are okay to say it's all right in PJs, hey, that's fine, no problem.
Exactly. And I've also heard another trick people have been talking about working from home is creating a commute to work. So I can say I've personally been walking around the block before I start work, and I found that quite useful as a way of delineating between when home time finishes and work starts, and vice versa. We've got another question.
Some people have a shower. Sorry, Henry. Some of the boundaries, some people shower.
There you go. Well, I'd always recommend showering before work. No, I think that it's about having a boundary, isn't it? And being able to, and then some of the comments are certainly coming through talking about that, finding it difficult to delineate between, for those people who can work from home, between work and home time. We've got one question, and it's it's coming up very quickly at 1 p.m. And there are a couple more slides. A question about how to deal with compassion fatigue. So obviously a lot of people in the sector deal with, a lot of, we're a people-facing sector, and we have a lot of people who have, a lot of issues that they carry around, and then there's that thing about how do you ensure that you don't necessarily, that you're compassionate enough, but you don't necessarily, take it home with you too much. But then also, how do you make sure that if you're dealing out compassion every day, that you don't experience fatigue? I'm not sure if you'd like to speak to that at all, Karen.
Sure, with pleasure, I can. Compassion fatigue is very, very, very common in sectors like disability. I think one of the things that we need to acknowledge is that compassion fatigue over time can turn into vicarious trauma. Once you have vicarious trauma, we're now really in a dangerous area of what we need to do, because it can affect our health. Compassion fatigue really, I think that there's a couple of things that you need to do. First and foremost is that we need to take that pause button, and we need to take a step back and actually think about what's going on within us. Why are we compassion fatigued? So we need to look within. This first thing, Henry. The second thing would be to, coming back to what I've made on various points today, look after your health. So often, if you're compassion fatigued, you're moving towards overwhelm. So take time out, take a deep breath, have a few days off to just reconsolidate what's going on. I think regular supervision, and that's a really key thing that I would like to make here, because a lot of times that I'm working in the community sector for a very, very many different organizations, there's not enough supervision. And or if supervision is there, it's sort of every couple of months. It needs to be monthly so that you can look after yourself and your people. So look within, take time out, consider what's going on in your life, exercise, health, sleep, nature, the beach, supervision. Really, it's about looking after yourself if you can, and taking that time between where you sit now and the compassion fatigue that's overwhelming you. It's really meaning that you get into a situation of overwhelm and you're tired. Watch out. boundaries, firm boundaries around what you're doing and how you're doing.
Great, thank you, Karen. So we do have a couple more slides. So for some people who may want to find out a little bit more about yourself and what you do, I think we've got a slide here that goes through it. Would you like to talk to this slide for a second, Karen?
Oh, sure. I won't spend too long. So as I explained earlier, we do a lot of executive coaching. We've been coaching for a long, long time. I actually really like that space because I think some CEOs struggle with a lot of different things. And it's, as I was working with the aged care sector with Viv Allenson, who you may not know, she was struggling and she eventually got the CEO of the year. So it's about just helping executives realign, I guess. So I'm doing a lot of leadership development. So a lot of people, so for example, in a disability home, we've been into a really large home and we've worked in some of their disability homes quite a lot, doing team development, doing a lot of emerging leaders. So how do we actually get the emerging leaders up to the place where they can take over or lead well? Run empowering people, empowering women to thrive programs, a lot of OD stuff, which I really enjoy, strategic and marketing plans, strategic reviews. Would love to hear from members if you think that we can help you. No obligation, just to chat would be wonderful to see if, how you're going, check in. But what I did want to say is that in terms of dealing with COVID-19, what we've done is that we've actually released 4 webinars and 4 3-hour online live training programs. And that was the incidents I was talking to just now. I prefer face-to-face, but in COVID, which we didn't see coming, we've adapted to do some of the online things. So it's about adapting to be able to be more resilient. And the webinars dealing with, I think that the webinars actually, Henry, are in the bottom of your workbooks. I think it'll tell you the first one is how to deal with the crisis as an exemplary leader. The second webinar is all about building resilience and stress, managing stress well. The third is how to manage virtual teams successfully. And the last one is about, from challenging crisis to a solid future. And then the 3-hour programs that are on Zoom live are actually at the bottom of your brochures. If you go to the very bottom of your workbooks, they're all there, and they're basically a longer version of the webinars where we give you more tricks and we give you more strategies and more techniques to deal with each of the issues that you may be having. And we'd love to offer you a 10% discount if you come in before April ends. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you. It would be amazing.
Thank you very much. So we've got the contact details there for people who would want to get in contact with Karen and find out more about the things that she does. And we've gone over 1 o'clock, and as I say, it was jam-packed. So first of all, I'd like to thank all of our attendees for joining us today, and I hope that they found it useful, and we're certainly getting comments through the chat that people have found it very useful. And I think Emerson said that the video will be made available sometime within the coming weeks. So if people would like to revisit it then. And so finally, thank you to you, Karen, for generously giving up your time, and stay well.
Thank you so much, Henry. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody on the line. It's just wonderful to be with you, and God bless during this time. Stay well.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone. Bye.